Fact 1. Luzones Indians.
There are 4.2 million Filipinos in the United States as of 2019.
Do most people know when Filipinos started coming to the U.S.?
Filipinos didn't start coming to the U.S. in numbers until the first Filipinos came to work in the sugarcane plantations in Hawaii in 1906. But the first Filipinos to set foot on American soil came much earlier in 1587.
Yes, they were crew members on the frigate named Nuestra, Señora de Buena Esperanza. We know about their journey from the narrative of their voyage, written by the ship's captain, Pedro de Unamuno.
There's a copy of his narrative written in elegant penmanship in the Archivo General de Indias in Sevilla, Spain.
Wait a minute, what's the narrative of the first Filipinos in America doing in an archive in Spain?
Remember that the Philippines was a colony of Spain for 333 years, from 1565 to 1898. And so a big part of the history of the Philippines is written in the Spanish language and is kept in the archives in Spain.
Wow. Is that why many Filipinos have Spanish names and family names? I get asked that question a lot by my Latino friends. Now I know what to say to them.
Yes, Ferdinand Magellan was the first Westerner to arrive in the Philippines under the flag of the Spanish monarch in 1521. But you know what happened to him.
Why? What happened to him?
He died in battle fighting against the men of a Filipino chief named Lapu-Lapu, who refused to submit to Magellan and the Spaniards.
After the battle, Magellan's men immediately and hurriedly left the Philippines and sailed back home to Spain. And that was that.
Until some 40 years later, in 1565, Miguel Lopez de Legazpi arrived in the Philippines and successfully established a colony in the name of the Spanish king.
So, from 1565 to 1898, the Philippines was a Spanish colony. And since the Philippines was so far away from Spain, it was governed through Mexico, which was also Spanish territory at the time.
In 1898, the United States acquired the Philippines from Spain at the Treaty of Paris, which ended the hostilities of the Spanish-American War of 1898.
U.S. victory in that war produced a peace treaty that compelled the Spanish to relinquish claims on Cuba and to cede sovereignty over Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines to the United States. The United States also annexed the independent state of Hawaii during the conflict.
That's all good and interesting, but let's get back to the story of the first Filipinos in America.
Thank you, Glenda. So, between 1565 and 1850, galleons, or ships, crossed the Pacific Ocean between Manila in the Philippines and Acapulco in Mexico, in what is now known as the Manila Galleon Trade.
The Manila Galleon trade brought porcelain, silk, ivory, spices, and myriad and other exotic goods from China to Mexico in exchange for New World silver.
It is estimated that as much as 1/3 of the silver mined in New Spain and Peru went to the Philippines to pay for the salaries of colonial officials in the Philippines and to pay for the goods imported from China and brought to Acapulco.
On the return leg, the galleon carried precious Chinese silk and porcelain ware to Acapulco. Then they crossed Mexico overland for shipment to Spain.
I think I see it now. It happened on one of those voyages of the Manila Galleon. It was on one of those voyages that the first Filipinos landed on American soil, on the coast of California.
Exactly. The galleon was the Nuestra Señora de Buena Esperanza, or Our Lady of Good Hope. The captain was Pedro de Unamuno. On board were Fray Ignacio Martin de Loyola, a few passengers, and Luzon Indians. At that time, Filipinos were called Indios in Spanish, which translates to Indians in English.
Really?
Father Martin was a Franciscan and a nephew of the great Ignacio de Loyola, founder of the Jesuits.
The galleon left Macau on July 12, 1587, and arrived in Acapulco on November 22nd. We know all this from the narrative of Unamuno, which is kept in the Archivo General de Indias in Sevilla, Spain.
It was on October 18, 1587, that they reached what Unamuno called Port of San Lucas, since they arrived on the feast of St. Luke.
We read the following from the captain's narrative. We considered what should be done, and whether some soldiers should land and explore the neighborhood of said harbor. All were agreed that the captain, with 12 soldiers and some Indians, armed with swords and targets, should land and look the ground over and make a reconnaissance of the vicinity of the said port. I landed with 12 soldiers, with their mail and arquebuses, Padre Martin Ignacio de Loyola carrying a cross in his hands, proceeding with some Luzon Indians with their swords and targets.
The captain continues to narrate in detail what happened. They had arrived on the 18th, and 3 days later, on the 21st, they had to sail away. During the 3 days they were there, they encountered American Indians. The landing party and the natives each had made attempts to signal peace with the other side, but were unsuccessful. The two sides got involved in a skirmish, and one Spaniard and one Luzon Indian were killed.
Back at the ship after the skirmish, the captain and the others decided it was best to continue with their voyage to Acapulco, where they arrived on November 22nd.
So that's the story of how, when, and why, on October 18th, 1587, the first Filipinos landed on American soil.
To this day, in Acapulco, Mexico, in the state of Guerrero, of which Acapulco is the most populous city, there are many families with the surname Maganda, the Tagalog word for beautiful. Surely, they are descendants of the Filipino sailors who were crew members of one of the galleon ships